Well, I've messed around and bought up a few 3408 and 3412 engines over the past few months. I have no idea what they were using this thing for. They've got quite a contraption rigged up here. It was obviously on some kind of a pump or something. I have no idea if this thing will run. The guy that sold it to me promised me that it would rotate, and that's all I know about it. I've never really done very much with these 3400 series V engines, so I'm no expert on these at all. I guess before I go to cranking on this thing, I might as well pull all four of these valve covers off, take a quick look in there, make sure the piece of shit hadn't already flown apart. Everything looks alright on this side, as far as I can tell. See what we got over here. Alright, well, the valve train, or at least the top end of it, seems to be all intact, so that's a good start. Coolant. Not so much. It's got oil in it, a little bit low. That's the return there. Building fuel pressure already, so sure it's still got some air in it, but okay, at least it's got something in it. It's good enough for now. If it starts running, I'll top it off. Okay, now I've got to figure out the shutdown solenoid, and since I never deal with these mechanical engines, I really don't have a clue what I'm talking about, but it looks to me like this is probably a mechanical override for the shutdown solenoid. So one way should be run and one way should be shut down. I don't know which is which. I could put power to this solenoid and find out, or I could just trial and error it. I mean, there's only two positions. This is the throttle right here, and I think that's idle where it's at. I think that's full throttle. You can tell when you push this forward that it wants to bias the throttle towards the full throttle position. So that tells me that maybe forward is going to be the run position. That's where I'm going to start, and we'll see if that's right. I've been cranking on the piece of shit a little bit more off camera. Nothing any different has happened. No sign that it's trying to fuel at all. Right now, I don't think it's a shutdown solenoid issue because I let it crank just a minute ago, walked around the engine while it was cranking and looked at the fuel pressure gauge down here, and it was not showing anything at all for fuel pressure. So I don't know if maybe the fuel transfer pump has gone bad or what. I've got another fuel transfer pump over there I can swap onto it, but that's going to be a deal for tomorrow. I'm out of time for today. I guess this came to me last night in my sleep. I don't really know why I didn't think of this before, but when I got these fuel lines ready yesterday, I just pulled them off right here in front of this block without really even thinking about it. That was the fastest, easiest thing to do, but there very well may be a check valve in that block. That block may need to be there. So what I'm going to do is just eliminate this first filter. I don't need that filter. All that's doing is filtering before it gets to the transfer pump, which is not a big deal. I guess I should explain how the fuel runs in this thing. So normally this is going to be your inlet for fuel. It's going to go through this filter, it's going to come out of it, go through this block, come out of the block right here. It's going to go up to the transfer pump, which is up here. That's what this is right here. It's going to go in one side, come out the other under pressure. It's going to send the fuel back down to the main filter housing, which is this one. This is what's going to filter the fuel before it gets to the injection pump. So it's going to go through there, through the filters, come back out, go back up, go to the injection pump to be used. Whatever the injection pump does not use is going to be sent back down. It's going to come back down to right here, which is where I figure there's probably a check valve to keep back pressure on the fuel system. And then from there, it's going to come out right here, out of the bottom of that block, and return to the tank. I've got to be able to crank this engine and see fuel pressure come up on that gauge down there. That's the first thing I need to see. If I can't get that to happen, it ain't ever going to start and run. Some kind of shit in here. Yeah, it's just a straight pass through. There's no valve in there. See? That's my finger coming across the end of that hose. So, that was a good idea, but that ain't the problem. I guess I'll go back to the original plan of looking at the transfer pump. Let me get that off there and see what it looks like inside. I don't see anything really wrong with it. I mean, it's definitely not brand new and it's not perfect, but the gears are in okay shape. The housing's not all chewed up. I'm sure the clearances aren't just perfect, but they're not bad. Drive gear on the bottom looks fine. Here's the other side. I mean, it's definitely got a little bit of wear in it, but nothing that should keep it from pumping fuel at all. So, don't really know yet. I guess the next thing to do here is to verify that it is being driven. The drive gear's right down there off the tip of my finger. Should be fine, but I guess I can crank on it and look down in there and verify that that drive gear is turning. I know it is. Alright, so obviously the drive gear is turning. I don't think there's anything wrong with this pump. I'm going to put it back together. I've got all that back together. Something has changed here for the better, I think, though, since I took all that apart. I just pumped this hand primer up, and I was able to build more fuel pressure on the gauge than what I ever did before, and it's not bleeding back down nearly as fast as it was before either. So now I'm wondering if one of these stupid push-to-leak connectors that they use wasn't just sucking a little air, not letting it build fuel pressure like it should. Still nothing. I've tried everything I know to try. I've purged lines and unplugged lines and pumped on the hand primer and purged the lines some more and everything else. No fuel pressure, so I guess tomorrow I should have a little time to mess with it. I'll swap the transfer pump out, even though I don't think there's anything wrong with the one on it, and more importantly, get rid of these plastic push-to-connect bullshit fuel lines, put some real fuel lines on it, and see what it does then. I've just about got the fuel lines swapped out for some real fuel lines now. Decided to go ahead and keep using the original transfer pump for a couple different reasons. One, because I don't think there's anything wrong with it, like I've already said. And two, part of the gasket is still stuck to it, and the other half of that gasket is up there on the injection pump housing where it needs to be. If I put a different pump on there, then I've got to worry about a new gasket. I don't have one here. If I use no gasket at all, or I use silicone or something like that, then I've got a potential gear lash issue between the gear on the transfer pump and the drive gear on the injection pump. There's nothing in this pump or these lines right now besides air. That's the suction line. I'm gonna stick that in a bucket of fuel, turn the pump by hand, and see if it'll prime. If it'll pump air, then it'll damn sure pump fuel. Still not making any fuel pressure, as you saw there. So I went and ate supper and came back and thought about this a little bit. I'm basing the whole idea that I've got a problem with fuel pressure on this old gauge here. So I pulled it off, went and grabbed the gauge off the other 3412 over there and put it on here. Let's crank it again, see if it shows any pressure on this gauge. It could just be that this gauge is faulty and is taking more pressure to move the needle than what it should. Okay, the needle actually moved in a forward direction that time, just a little bit, finally. I should have changed that gauge out first, but it is what it is. And don't let your kids fall in a bucket and drown. I mean, how many kids have fallen into buckets and drowned? Talk about bad luck. Anyway, now that I've seen that, I know that the transfer pump is actually moving some fuel, and I can go ahead and try to get it to start. Probably gonna have to bleed some lines. I guess I'll crack them right here where they go into the rocker boxes. Pretty hard to beat that. Alright, well, I'm covered in oil and I smell like the inside of an exhaust manifold. I'm gonna go take a shower. Tomorrow I'll take it out, top the coolant off, and let it run a while. Alright, I've got it full of coolant, and I stripped a bunch of wires and garbage off of it that won't be needed in its next life, wherever it ends up. So I'm gonna fire it up now, let it run a little while, let it warm up, and see what it does. Here's a lot of the junk that came off of it. That's not all of it, but that's most of it. Well, it runs pretty good for a wore out piece of shit. It's got a lot of blow by. There's obviously a couple cylinders that are hurting pretty bad, but fuel shutdown deal up here works exactly like I thought it was going to. Forward is run and backwards is shut down. Alright, it runs. Let's get it cleaned up and ready for sale. Get all this oil and shit off of it. I've got a brand new pressure washer up there. It's still in the box. Haven't even opened it yet. Let's try her out. My old pressure washer was like 20 years old and it finally quit, so I decided to replace it with a brand new one instead of fixing it. I'm sure it won't be as good as that last one I had, but this one is 3-phase. You can get these single phase too. I'm gonna have to wire a plug in though before I can use it. I don't have the right plug right now. This is one of those 240 volt 3-phase services with the wild leg, they call it. So what I should have is 240 volts roughly between any of the 3 phases, and then from 2 out of the 3 phases to the neutral I should have about 120, and then the other phase to the neutral, I'm trying to remember, I hadn't messed with this in a while, I think it's 208. So let me grab a meter, check some voltages, make sure I know what I'm talking about. I am not an electrician. Let's go here. 248, so those are 2 phases. Let's go there. 247.5, those are 2 phases. Let's go between these two. 246. Okay, so those are going to be 3 phases right there. This bottom wire must be the neutral. So neutral to this phase, I've got 124. That's one of the 120 legs. Let's go this phase to the neutral, 213. So that's the wild leg. That's supposed to be about 208. So the black wire is the wild leg. Not that that really matters for what I'm doing here. And then the neutral to this phase should be 120. Yeah, 123. Okay, so that all checks out. Alright, done with that 3412 finally. This is a 3408B industrial engine. Factory original rating was 475 horsepower. It was built on June 26th of 1990. This thing, its last use was on a drilling rig. I bought both of these next two 3408s from the same guy. He was running these engines on his drilling rig and pretty much wore them both out, I guess. This one does have a failure in it. So as far as the question of will it run, It might run really bad, but it's not going to be worth messing with. It's missing a few things, missing an injection line over here, I noticed, and being that I know that it's got a cylinder failure, it's just not really worth the time to screw with it, especially since I've got one right there that's almost identical, and I'll do everything I reasonably can to make that one run. It's in a little better shape. I think they may have even pulled one of the heads off to verify the failure when it happened. But it's not a complete piece of junk. It's just not a runner. It's a rotating engine, so it's a good core for somebody that's looking to build a 3408 or a good parts engine or whatever. Looks like it's got a pretty fresh injection pump on it. I don't know what the story is on that. I don't remember him telling me anything about that, but you can tell that's definitely not the original pump. It got put on as bare metal and never painted. And it's even got a pretty fresh looking sticker left on it there, so I don't think it's been on there that long. Looks like it could have had an overhaul in November of 2006. Okay, here's the other 3408 from the drilling rig. This is a 3408C industrial engine, built January 27th of 1998. So as far as mechanical 3408s go, it's a pretty modern one. There is such a thing as a 3408E, which is an electronic engine, but it's a HUE engine, not a MUE engine. It's got pretty much a brand new turbo on it. I think he said they ran that turbo one day after they put it on. I don't remember why they wound up putting a brand new turbo on a worn out engine. There was a reason for it, I just can't remember what it was. But as far as I know, there's no failure in this engine. And by the way, these 3408s have got the same bore and stroke as the 3412s. 5.4 inch bore, 6 inch stroke. So they're 18 liter V8. Okay, got to get some fuel lines rigged up. I'm going to steal this plate over here off of this one because it's got a fuel filter base mounted on it. And then I'll probably steal that filter right there off that 5EK. And then I just need a few fuel lines, about 4 of them, and that really should be it other than a starter. Don't know if I've got another 24 volt starter over there that's good. I definitely have a 12 volt starter. Let me run over there and see what I've got and get all that rigged up. I forgot to mention, SIS didn't list a factory horsepower rating for this engine. Used to be on this tag right here, but it's been rubbed off over the years. I'm pretty sure that he told me he runs about 550 horsepower on that rig, so it should be set somewhere around there. Well, we're gonna see what the little 39MT thinks about a 3408. It's 12 volts, so I'm gonna have to round up another battery cable, but I can probably manage that. Should be pretty much ready to go here. Most importantly, it's got oil in it. I've got the shutdown held in the run position, I think, as long as it works the way the 3412 did, and it should. Got all the fuel lines on. So the fuel's coming out of the bucket. In other words, the suction is the bigger line there on the right. It's coming up, going into the transfer pump right there. Goes through the transfer pump, comes out under pressure right here through this line. That line takes it around, brings it into the fuel filter base right here. It goes through the filter, comes back out of the filter right here through this line that's looped around. That's gonna send it over here to the injection pump. It's gonna go through the injection pump. Some of it's gonna get used. Whatever does not get used is gonna come out right there through that smaller line, and that's gonna return it back to the bucket. I also discovered what they're using to keep back pressure on the fuel system. I'll show you on that engine over there. It's going to be a lot more easy to see. This fitting right here where the fuel comes back out of the injection pump, looks like it's all plugged up, but it's not. There's a little bitty orifice in the middle of that fitting. Trying to get it in some kind of focus. That little black dot in the middle, that's an orifice. So that's what they're using to create resistance in that fuel system so that the transfer pump actually makes fuel pressure. All hooked up, 12 volt. And I've got the injection lines cracked where they go into the rocker boxes. All 4 of them on this side. So I'm gonna crank on it a little bit. I'm not really trying to start it. I'm just trying to get fuel there. Then I'll tighten them back up and then I'll start it.
Okay, well that was a whole lot easier than I thought it was gonna be. There seems to be fuel pouring into the valley of the block here from somewhere, but I don't know where it's coming from. It doesn't really smell like fuel, it doesn't smell like anything, but I'm sick, I can't smell anyway, so I don't know. Maybe it is fuel, I'm sure it is, it looks like fuel. I guess the best thing to do is not worry about it. Well, I wasn't near as eventful as that 3412. I'm tired, I'm going to bed. I'm gonna tell you right up front that this 3412 Genset turns into a big cluster and you're not gonna get to see it run. So go ahead and watch if you want, but you've been warned. Alright, it's another day. That 3408 seemed to run pretty good, but that's not really a surprise to me. I figured it would. This unit right here, however, is another complete unknown. This is a 3412 Genset that I bought off the same guy that I bought that first 3412 off of, sitting out there. And the only thing that he guaranteed me on it is that the engine rotates. He said he had never tried to fire it up. He just bought the thing off somebody else, so I have absolutely no history on it. Don't have a clue if it'll run. I don't have a clue if it'll generate power. Nothing. It does seem to be in pretty good original shape though. It's not all cut up. Counter shows 6,043 hours, I believe. Yeah, 6043, which means absolutely nothing because that's not the original counter to the unit. It could have more hours on it than that, or it could have less. Okay, so this is a 420 kW standby rated Genset. The engine is rated 545 horsepower at 1800 RPM. All the wiring and everything over on this side seems to be intact. It's got battery leads that run up here to the front. So assuming that all that's good, I should be able to connect batteries there. And I may even be able to start it back here from the panel just like you're supposed to. I don't know if I'll get that lucky, but I'll find out. I think that's what they call an isochronous governor, which means it's designed to hold the engine at one speed and one speed only, regardless of the load on the engine, which that's going to be 1800 RPM in this case. You got to have 1800 RPM to make 60 Hz power. Now obviously this one is probably not going to go straight to 1800 when it starts, being that the throttle linkage is not connected. I think that's spring loaded towards the idle position, but I'm not 100% sure about that. This is how that should be. But I guess the next thing I should do before I go any further is pull the valve covers off, all four of them, get a look at the top end, make sure it's all intact. I don't see anything wrong in here at all. It just looks to me like an engine that hasn't been run in a really, really long time, like 10 to 15 years. I mean, this is an early 80s Genset, so even if it was 15 years ago that it last ran, the thing was still 25 plus years old at that time. Here's the other side. Look at the oil in this thing. It's brand new. Can't hardly even see it on the dipstick. That's a good sign. People usually don't change the oil in blown up engines. All right, let's take a look at the coolant. There's a pretty good sized brown recluse right there. Okay, that bastard's dead. Let's try this again. Well, you can tell it's damp in there. It's a little low, but that's all right. If I get it running, I'll top it off. Batteries are hooked up, 24 volt. I guess I can turn this battery disconnect on.
See if anything catches on fire. I don't see anything smoking yet. That's a good start. I've got a piece of plywood cut here ready to go, since I think it's probably been quite a few years since this thing ran last, just in case it tries to run away on me. These are not terribly notorious for doing that, I don't think. They're not like a two-stroke Detroit that runs away every time it gets a chance, but anytime there's a rack involved, I guess there's always that possibility. Alright, I don't really know how these work. I thought that this would be a start switch, but it's not. Or it doesn't work if it was. We got a panel light though. So I think next thing I'm gonna try is gonna be this engine auto control selector. I think maybe if I go to auto or manual, it might crank. It's not gonna crank on off, obviously, or stop. Okay. Alright, so it will crank on manual. I guess that's where I'll start. I'm gonna crack the 6 injector lines down this side before I start cranking on it. Alright, here's where I'm at with this thing. I quit on it the other night. It was getting late and it was apparent that it wasn't going to start and run very quickly. So it's a couple days later now. I've got a little time to mess with it off and on today, I think. Couple issues I'm having. Number one, same as that first 3412, not getting anything out of the fuel transfer pump. It's a pretty simple deal. I'll get that figured out. I just got to have a little time to mess with it. Alright, that's bleeding down nice and slow like it should as it comes through that orifice. Pretty sure I've got fuel all the way through the system, so I'm going to start cranking on it again. I'll put the camera on this gauge and see if that needle moves forward at all. I got to see that needle move forward. Well, nothing at all. I've got the transfer pump pulled off of it. I decided before I take it apart, I just wanted to see if it's self-primed. So I got the suction line running into the bucket. And I have sat here and spun this thing and can't get anything at all to happen. Put my finger over the outlet port there. Can't feel it moving any air or anything at all. I've spun it both ways just to make sure that I'm not going the wrong way. Nothing. Okay, I've got this pump in half. Watch right over here between the gear teeth and the pump housing. I'm gonna work this shaft back and forth. See how much clearance there is there? So the point here is not really how much shaft movement there is. I mean, the other half of that pump would limit that quite a bit. But regardless of where the thrust is on that shaft, that clearance is there and it's not going away. That's where. So I think this pump is probably good enough that if you ever got the engine running, it would probably run the engine. But in a startup situation where it's not turning very fast, especially when it hasn't been running a long time and there's air in the lines, this pump is just not good enough to get everything primed up and get it going. So I'm gonna pull the pump off of this 3408C, because as you saw a little bit earlier in the video, this thing fired right up. I know that that pump is good and that will solve that problem. Okay, here's the 3408C pump. Same thing, I'm gonna see if it'll self-prime. Suction line in the bucket. Here we go. Yeah. That pump is way better than that other one. I've got that pump swapped on there. I'm gonna go back to cranking on it and see what happens next. Okay, I really don't have any idea what to expect out of this fuel shutdown solenoid as far as which position is going to be on and which one's off. And same thing on the throttle. I think that's going to be idle, but I really don't have a clue. So next thing I'm going to do is crack 3 or 4 of these lines on this side, crank it one more time, and see if I get any fuel there. Still no fuel spraying out of these cracked lines. I guess I don't need to get ahead of myself. Let me just go ahead and verify fuel pressure, even though I know I've got some now. Okay, maybe I don't have any fuel pressure. This pump apparently is what was dumping fuel into the valley of that 3408 when it ran, because now I've got the same thing happening here. So I don't know what's going on there. I'm gonna pull that counter off there and snug those bolts back up that hold the 2 pump halves together. All the bolts in the pump housing are tight. I checked all the plugs and fittings in the pump. Everything's good. They're snug. The O-rings are good. I have verified that the pump is turning when cranking, and it's turning the right direction. So the only thing left that it can possibly be is the suction line. There must be a hole in the suction line somewhere. And that thing's damn near from the Vietnam War era, so that very well could be it. Let me swap that line out for something different, see if that solves it. I mean, this should not be hard. This is just a gear pump and a bucket of fuel. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble. I've got completely different suction lines on it all the way from the bucket to the transfer pump now. I pulled that line off right there. That's the pressure line coming out of the transfer pump. When I crank the engine, that should be spraying fuel. If it's not, something ain't happening that's supposed to be happening. And at this point, that seems pretty apparent. Alright, well that's why we don't have any fuel pressure. I just don't understand why that's happening. I gotta figure it out. I'm bypassing that stupid block and those 2 shitty lines. I've got the suction line going into the transfer pump right straight into the bucket. And the pressure line coming out of the transfer pump is still unhooked, so here we go. I'm gonna pull the pump back off of it now, I guess. Alright, I'm finally starting to get somewhere here. I think I've solved multiple mysteries all at once. That's the suction line that's on there. It's in the bucket of fuel, nothing new. I was turning the pump, it's pumping fuel. Everything looks good. Stuck my thumb over the outlet port and kept turning it. And it started filling up this cavity in here where the shaft comes through. Let me dump that out. So obviously the shaft seal in that pump is bad. I think the rest of the pump is good as far as the gears and the clearance between the gears and the housing, but that seal is not good. So when this pump was on the 3408 that it came off of originally, it had a counter on it. But when I had it on the 3412 here a few minutes ago, it did not have a counter on it. I didn't think a counter was a critical component, and I still really don't. I don't think they're relying on the counter to seal that up. I think they're relying on the shaft seal. But the counter does seal on there with an O-ring, and that would seal that up if it were on there. So I think if I put a counter on it, it'll work. It'll keep that from being able to leak fuel under pressure, and it'll keep it from sucking air too. It also might explain where the fuel came from in the valley of both blocks. It was probably coming out of there. Back together again, got the pump on, got a counter on the pump. Let's see if I got any fuel pressure now. Alright, here's what I figured out. That's still the pump that originally came off that 3408 right there. And long story short, this pump really isn't any good either. It's better than the first one that I pulled off here, but it's still not good. The reason that engine started so easily, I think, is because number one, it hadn't been that long since it ran last. I'm guessing 3 or 4 months. This has been way longer than that, so the fuel system on this thing is a lot drier. But more importantly, the fuel lines in this setup are a lot longer, and I'm having to lift the fuel a whole lot higher up than what I did over there. So I have sat here and spun this pump with it up here high, and it will not pull fuel and prime itself. It's just not good enough to get that done. So before I go out there and pull the pump and lines off that other 3412 and go through all that, which is not really a big deal, but before I do that, I'm gonna stick the bucket of fuel up here high and see if that will help it enough to get it going. Alright, finally, after probably 4 or 5 hours of messing around with this thing over the past 2 or 3 days, I have got a transfer pump that's moving a little fuel and making a little bit of fuel pressure. Don't know if you could tell there or not, but that needle did move forward just a little bit, so that's all I need to see. That should be good enough. Getting the bucket raised up there was just enough to make it work. I also noticed that on this transfer pump here, the little indented area is full of fuel now, so that confirms my theory that the fuel was pushing past that bad shaft seal and out past the counter and then going into the valley of both of these blocks with this pump. So that is what's happening, and that is where the fuel's coming from, so that mystery is solved for sure too. I've got a little better O-ring on that counter now than what it had before, so it's sealed up a little bit better, but still not perfect, and it's not a new O-ring. So what this whole deal boils down to is that I've had nothing but a bunch of junk here the whole time, which is no surprise, and it's all been just bad enough to work against me to keep it from working. Batteries are charging up again. I think I'm gonna pull this fuel shutdown solenoid off here in the meantime. Something just doesn't feel right about the way this thing's moving back and forth compared to that other one over there. Things are not looking too good here. I think I've wasted my time on this unit as far as trying to get it running. So that solenoid obviously has seen better days. No wonder that thing was getting hot. And like I said, I thought this felt weird. Well, it does, because that's not hooked to anything. So either something is broken in there as far as a linkage or a spring. I think there's supposed to be something spring loaded against this, holding it one way or the other. And then you put pressure on it against the spring to go the other way. Obviously, that ain't happening no more. So either whatever is spring loaded is seized in one position and just letting the linkage flop loose, or like I said, something's broken. Either way, that's gonna be a problem depending on which position that's stuck in, whether it's no fuel or fuel on. Let me go show you what that should do. This is that same linkage on a different genset. This will be the next unit in this video, but this is how that should be. Spring loaded that direction, you push against it to go that way. I can tell that that's actually moving something inside the pump. That's right. And then over here I've got this. What I'm gonna do is let the batteries charge one more time. I'm gonna crank on it a little bit more. And if I don't start to see something real promising happen pretty quick, then I'm probably gonna give up on it. I don't have much doubt that it would run. I'm almost sure that it would, but it's just gonna take me way more time to figure out these pump issues than what it's really worth. I just don't have time to mess with it. Alright, I give in. I've got other stuff I've got to get done. For all I know, the injection pump is stuck in a no fuel position. I could sit here and crank on this thing for the next 10 days and nothing would happen. I've got 3 or 4 injector lines cracked, nothing out of any of those this whole time. No signs of life at all. So will it run? Maybe, but not without some attention on the injection pump first. It is what it is. I'm moving on to the next unit. Alright, here's the final unit. I saved the best for last. You don't see this every day. This is a 3408 standby generator that came out of a hospital on the East Coast that they tore down about 1.5 years ago, I think. As far as I know, this unit went into that hospital when it was brand new back in 1984 and stayed there its whole life. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. It's always been maintained by a generator company. I think that's by law on a hospital standby generator. Pretty much in pristine condition, other than being a little dirty. I'm sure it's never ever been cleaned in its whole life, not even once. The thing that makes it kind of an anomaly is that it's got a legitimate original 812 hours on it. You can tell that that counter is the original one. It's never been off there. It doesn't have the new cat logo on top. It matches the rest of everything around it. And it's pretty common to find these standby generators low hour like this, but they're usually not 3408s. And you can just tell by looking at the exhaust manifolds and the turbo turbine housing that it just has not been run very much at all. So you're gonna be pretty hard pressed to find a 3408 direct inject turbocharged after-cooled engine in 2025 that has a legitimate 812 hours on it since it was brand new. The electricals all look pretty good to me. I'm no generator expert, but looks pretty much like it just came out of the factory in there, other than being dusty and dirty. 3 phases are right there with the transformers on them, and then the neutrals on the left. These make 480 volt 3-phase, or they can be reconnected to make 240 volt 3-phase, but they're usually at 480. The engine is rated 450 horsepower at 1800 RPM. The generator has a 350 kW standby rating. I've had it hooked to batteries for a little while now. Nothing is on fire, nothing is smoking. Wiring over here all looks pretty good. I think that's a coolant heater that they plug into wall power when it's installed in a building. This being a standby generator, you never know when it's going to be needed. And you don't really want it coming online going to 1800 RPM and making power when it's completely cold, so you keep the coolant warm all the time. Got a few seeps over on this side, which is to be expected for a 40-year-old engine. Nothing major, I don't think. So I should be able to start it back there from the panel just like you're supposed to, hopefully. I want it to crank a little bit though before it starts and goes to 1800. It's been probably 3 or 4 years since it ran last, so I don't want it to start too fast until I get some oil pressure built up and get some oil moving around. Looking at the fuel side over here, looks like it's got some pretty new lines on it. That is going to be nice for a change. See what the oil looks like. I think I've looked at this once before and it's real nice. Oh yeah. Okay. 2021 on the hoses. All right, let me get some fuel over here, and I guess that's pretty much it. Start cranking. Before I do that, I'm gonna pull the valve cover off this side. I'm not worried about it having a problem or anything. I just wanna look in there and see how clean it is. Like brand new in there. I've got no doubt that it's got 800 original hours on it. Inside of the valve cover. Coolant's full, looks all right. Light makes it look kind of weird, makes it look red. It's actually green, I think. I'm gonna check this air filter out real quick too. Got an oil pressure gauge right here. So what I'm gonna do is set the camera up. I don't want it to start yet. I'm gonna set the camera up right here to watch this fuel shutdown solenoid linkage. And I'm just gonna bump the starter and I'm gonna see if that moves. Whichever position it's in when that starter starts going should be the run position, and then I'll know. Okay, it didn't move, so that must be run. I'm gonna tie that back there in the shutdown position and then do a little crank and build some oil pressure. Boy, it does not like that. I just saw that gauge jump a little bit. It may have been stuck. Let's try again here. All right, we got oil pressure. This may be a two-handed deal, but anyway, I'm gonna untie that, let that go back to the run position, and then crank on it a little more to see if it'll start. If we don't have any fuel issues like I have with all the other ones of these I've messed with, it should fire up fairly quick, but you know, I'm not getting my hopes up. All right, I really like that. That's way better than screwing around for 5 or 6 hours with a bunch of transfer pumps and fuel lines and shit. So I'm gonna haul it outside now, let it run for 15 or 20 minutes probably. I'm sure that'll do it some good. Let it get up to temperature and see what it does. Well, I'm pretty happy with that. A guy would have to put a load on it and run it for 10 or 12 hours straight to really figure out what he's got, but so far everything seems to be good. About 160 or a little more on the gauge was as warm as it wanted to get, so I went ahead and shut it down. It wasn't getting any hotter. Alright, that's everything for this video as far as test running stuff, but before I end this, I'm going to give an update on the haul truck, the one where I rebuilt the engine with the used parts. If you haven't seen the video or don't know what I'm talking about, there's a video on the channel here that's like 2 hours long of that. So here's what happened. That tire finally let go, but it lasted longer than I thought it would. Hauled about 5,000 or 6,000 yards with it so far. So I'm gonna get that changed out this morning. That will probably be a pretty good time by myself. And then when I get done struggling with that and I get going here today and get this thing warmed up, I'll show you the blow by on this engine. It's down to almost nothing. It's broken in good. Here's about a 35-degree cold start on a 1982 3306 cat and a 973. So I can get that off there. Well, I'm getting there. I devised this method of lifting this tire last night laying in bed. I just wrapped a chain around the edge of it here so I could get out on the tire as far as I could, and then I put a binder on the chain to snug it up to the tire so it won't come off, and then I've got another chain running from that chain up to the bucket. That gets me out here on the outside of the tire with it. That way I should be able to just walk it up in here and be clear of the truck and the bed and everything, I hope. So now the trick is just to get it in there and hit the hole. Alright, I got that tire put on there and I've been hauling with it for 2 or 3 hours now. So I'll fire it up and show you what the blow-by looks like with the engine warmed all the way up and broken in now. This is the one I rebuilt with all the used parts, used liners, pistons, rings. So just a tiny little bit of visible blow by there, but I'm more than happy with it. It's been running like a top, hadn't missed a beat. So anyway, I guess I'm gonna go back to hauling. Well, I had a pretty good run, but I think it's done. Had to leave it down here the other night. I've got a load on it and I couldn't get out of this bottom. Been having some intermittent transmission issues the whole time I've been running it. Third gear and reverse have intermittently been slipping, but I've been able to get it to work right most of the time until now. Now it's not wanting to pull hard in any gear, even first and second are slipping. So I'm gonna fire it up and see if it wants to come out of here today. I'm gonna take off and let it shift in a second, see if it somehow pulls it in second. The problem is the truck won't even pull the hill in second. I already know that. It doesn't have enough power. It's a pretty steep hill. I know it probably doesn't look steep, but it is. Okay, it's not gonna go up the hill on its own, that's pretty obvious. All in all, it worked out pretty well for me fixing that truck the way I did. I hauled about 10,000 cubic yards of dirt with it before the transmission gave out, and I hauled that 10,000 yards about a half a mile, so pretty good bit of hauling. Well, I think that's about all I got for this one. Here's a few shots of the UP 4014. I had a short 3-year railroad career before I quit and got into all this. Never did get to ride a steam engine, but I rode a whole bunch of the SD70Ms like the one they usually put behind it, just like the one in these videos. Actually, I hit a loaded semi one time in an SD70M just like the one in these videos. 51 mile an hour, it was the wildest shit I've ever seen. And let me tell you, those cabs are built pretty well. It caved the whole nose of that SD70 in about 12 inches. I couldn't even get out of the nose door. But other than that, it was good, and nobody got killed, so good day. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.